because we still have this pandemic hovering over us, and our government, together with the private sector, both have been trying to find means and ways by which we could be able to at least absorb this threat to our lives, and in many ways to make it easier for most of us. And so last May 6th, our president, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, passed an executive order. I think it's executive order number 114. And that means we are institutionalizing a program called Balik Probinsya, Bagong Pag-asa. So what does this mean? They came about this precisely because when they were already implementing the Bayanihan Act that was passed 2 months ago, which gives some kind of a social amelioration fund to the 18 million of those belonging to the poverty line of our society, they could see now how difficult it is to do this precisely because in many of our barangays, in many of our informal settlers communities, it is very difficult even to sort them out. Why so? Because of the decongestion. They are simply just crowded all together. Many of you who have visited these places or passed by them, those of you who haven't seen them, but you could see images of them whenever you look in your Facebook or whenever you read the newspapers. You have photographs and images of this. In a long, some time back, we used to call them squatter colonies, but they were given a fancier name and they're called informal settlers. But what am I leading on to? I would like to relate now exactly what we're going to discuss or what we're going to talk about as far as this institutionalizing of whatever is happening now with our informal settlers into this program called Balik Barangay or Balik Probinsya, Bagong Pag-asa. What does it mean, Balik Probinsya? Well, if my memory serves me right, and this is a long, long time ago, on the 60th birthday of President Ferdinand E. Marcos, he had this banner for that celebration. Agsubli ti barangay. Go back to the barangay. What did it mean at the time? Well, I would like to relate that to this executive order of President Duterte and relate it further to what is the meaning of roots. In other words, you will ask yourself or you will ask other people most of the time, taga saan ka? Isn't it usually a question? Saan ka nanggaling? Taga saan ka? Taga saan ang magulang mo? Where are you coming from? What is your province? Where are your parents from? In other words, you're asking for some kind of an identity as it is related to roots. What does it mean? If we go by the plant life, for instance, when you say roots, these are, for plant life, these are those little tentacles that they have which reaches into the soil. They're grounded and they need this to be able to obtain sustenance for them to be able to grow. But when you speak of people and you ask, where are your roots? Saan ka nanggaling? Normally, it is asked, well, our generation would ask this of us every time, let's say, for instance, somebody would like to court you or there is some gentleman or some boys hovering around wanting to find out if they could visit you and so forth. Our grandmothers and our mothers too would ask, taga saan yan? Where is he from? It's usually being asked. The same manner goes likewise with the men, with the boys. Their parents would also ask them, especially the mothers. I would ask this. If my son, for instance, would be fancying a girl, I would ask, taga saan siya? Where is she from? Where does this all lead to? It leads to roots. That's how important roots are. This is where actually we are supposed to be identified with. The place, not exactly where we were born, because many of us are already born in the cities, but where were our parents from? What were the origins of our ancestry? So here we are able to trace exactly not just the traditions, not just the culture, not just the assumptions that we had, but the colorful life that they had then, if it is surrounded precisely with what we know as the provincial life. Balik sa probinsya. That's exactly why I'm relating it to the executive order just recently signed by the president. We are relating this to the fact that where are we going to go back to? If we're going to do a survey, for instance, of all of those who live in this informal settlers communities, and you would ask them, taga saan ka? Or where are you from? Where do you want to go back? As they say, you're not really being compelled, you're not obligated to go back. But can you imagine how important it is that when you try to sort out a person's personality, his his behavior, his character, his, where he's coming from, you would normally say, Kapampangan yan, Ilocano yan, ay Bisaya yan, Ilonggo yan. You see, you always relate it to some place. You always relate it to somewhere out there, outside of the urban center, as a matter of fact, where this person is coming from. Those are our roots. And that is why when you read about this, when you can see that the government is trying its best to find out how Metro Manila especially could be decongested, that is exactly what it's trying to do. That's why they call it Bagong Pag-asa. And new hope, and new horizon, and new place. New? It is not exactly new. It is simply going back. Perhaps they've forgotten this. Maybe they've stayed in Manila or in the metropolis for, the longest period of time. Maybe a whole generation was already born here. But then again, if you ask, where are you from? Those are the roots. The roots are where they were actually first established or born, or where exactly they grew. And from there, before they started to move about in another place, that is where their origins are. What are our roots? Well, if we look at the barangay, for instance, originally that was the balanghay. That was the Malay term for this big boat, which could accommodate something like about 50 or about 80 or 90 people even. But who are they? They belong to one family, the extended family. The parents, their children, their children's children, cousins, aunts, uncles. It's a whole community of relatives. That was where they were traveling from one island to the other. All the different islands of our country, for instance, our archipelago, they were moving from they were docking or moving from one place to the other. And the boat that they were riding on was called the balanghay. And so when they settled, that is exactly how they also called the place where they settled. This is our balanghay. In other words, this is our community. Eventually, when the Spaniards came, they probably either could not pronounce balanghay, or perhaps it is the guttural way of pronouncing it in the Spanish language, so it was now called the barangay. And in the beginning, it was simply an address. The barangay, where the head of that, originally, the pre-Spanish times, the head of the barangay was the cabeza, the barangay, or the barangay captain. No, I'm sorry. That was prior to the Spanish times. They were called the datu, the ruler. During the Spanish times, they were called the cabeza, the head of the barangay. So that is where the Balik Probinsya is actually going to take place. The people here in the congested areas, here in Manila and in the other cities of the National Capital Region, if they wish to go back, the President has now had this executive order to institutionalize the process by which they could return to their roots, to their barangay. And that is out there in the countryside. That is where their grandparents, their great-grandparents, their ancestry, that is where they first began to learn many things in life. That is where they developed their character. That is where they included in their development their culture, and of course many other things, the beliefs, the assumptions, the mythologies, the legends. All of that comprise the roots of these people who were first established in the original barangays. And then what happened? And then they started moving away. They went to other places. They went looking, as they say, for greener pastures. But can you imagine, or at least perhaps you would realize, that when, for instance, some time back, when many of our household help were coming from the provinces, and I would ask them, bakit kayo andito sa Manila? Why did you transfer to the cities? And they said, well, we're looking for some of them, actually, they were looking for adventure. The others said they would want to see what other life there is. At that time, it was not just a difficulty they were having in the provinces or in their barangays. It was a sense of adventure in many ways. So perhaps that's what exactly we can do now. Have these people now interviewed and asked them if they would wish to go back to their barangays for a sense of adventure. That's precisely why the executive order was named Balik sa Probinsya, Bagong Pag-asa. Bagong Pag-asa, meaning to say they already had a beautiful life then, but they will just have to recreate this one more time. So this includes really an entire process of making the countryside not only attractive for these people, but also beneficial. And that is why, together with this institutionalizing of this particular program, the President has seen fit to have all of the other agencies of government gathered together so that each one of them can contribute first to establish the barangays out there in the countryside as something which could be a better place to live in, where you could have your own plot of land, where you can actually plant your own vegetables and raise your own food products, and also contribute to the growth of the country, which is also one of the centers of the programs that will have to be instituted now, which is exactly our food production. So it is that it goes. Executive Order 114 is nothing else except agsubli di barangay. Return to your roots, return to the barangay, and there try to find out exactly what it is that you have lost, trying to be civilized in the city, but there you could see all the wonders, all the beauty, all the mythological magic of what it is to live in the countryside. I'm trying to make this as attractive as it is, but that's exactly how it's going to be. Let's get back to this, and let's get back to our roots, and there to realize how important it is, not just to get sustenance from the ground and to grow from there, but sustenance from our ancestry, from the place of birth of our great-grandparents, our parents, and perhaps there we would recreate a life that we are really worthy to live with dignity and with honor.